Welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. Signed, sealed, remembered, Elvis, Nancy, and Bill. And today, we're still on the set of Speedway as we delve into the romance that may or may not have existed between Elvis and Nancy Sinatra, and that certainly existed between Elvis and Priscilla, and that may or may not have existed between Elvis and Anne Margaret. But we're going to do all that when we come back from a song. And in this song, we're going to return to the wedding. It's the song of how Elvis and Priscilla snuck onto Frank Sinatra's jet named the Christina and got married. And now Elvis is making a movie with Nancy Sinatra. Hi, Gun. Hi, Tarzan. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate seeing you both here. This is Christina at Midnight.
Slipped out the back with a bullhorn hop over stucco walls where the flashbulbs stop. Joni's got colors, Joe's got the cash, Danny Kaye's in the cockpit, burning jet fuel fast. Sinatra's bird, she's purring like a prayer. Christina's wings cut the desert air. Brad's not on the list, he's pacing the floor, while the Carlos got the press in a ballroom wall. Mona's got a sin and a Polaroid grin, but the ring's in a case with the diamonds grinning in. $15 for a license and a lie, while the best men shine with a bullseye tie. Blinded by the flight, wrapped up like a vow in the Vegas night. Blinded by the flight, with a heartbreak hitch in the morning light. Oh, we were flying on a secret stream to a chapel dream, but the brother got burned by the wedding machine. Palm Springs whispers, Bland's got the suit, but the real show's hidden in a velvet beat. Mama's flown in, Daddy's eyes are wide, while the Memphis boys are split on the right. Livich opens up his velvet chest, bullhead complaints, diamonds in the west. But Red's got a wound that won't sit still, he's shouting down love from the windowsill. Color's got a script and a phantom plan, he's dealing out silence with a sleight of hand. You got too many, he says with a grin, let go of the love if you want to win. Blinded by the flight, ran up like the bow in the Vegas night. Blinded by the flight, when the heartbreak hits you the morning light. Oh, we were flying on a secret stream to a chapel dream, but the brother got burned by the wedding machine. Christina's wheels kissed the tarmac clean, and the ring was slipped before the world had seen. But love, oh love, it don't run on time, it breaks in the silence, now the headline.
Thank you for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And while we're back here at the wedding, let's take an opportunity to remember where we've been so that we can see where we're going. And we'll do that with this calendar of May 1967, a month that we've recently walked through. And on Monday, May 1st, that's the day that Elvis got married. That was the day of the wedding. And then on the 2nd and the 3rd, there was the Palm Springs honeymoon. And they probably did some things on the 4th, but they also fly to Memphis. And maybe they did, maybe it was pretty early on the 4th. I should have wrote that down on here. But as we can see, this Palm Springs honeymoon where they rode horses, and some people remember it being, like a week, it was 2 days. And then they fly back to Memphis and they spend the day probably just getting over the jet lag and resting, and they're at Graceland, where they've got nice, comfortable beds and they can order up anything they want to eat. The cooks will be able to make it. And then on the 5th, they go over to the Circle G, which is just 10 or 15 minutes down the road, and they begin their Circle G honeymoon. And we know they spend at least one night in the trailer because Lamar is there with them in that trailer. He says that you could say he went on their honeymoon with them. So I'm guessing that Elvis was on the Circle G Ranch or going back and forth between Graceland and the Circle G Ranch for the rest of this month. And on the 8th, which is a Monday, the Monday after Elvis gets married, that's the day that Anne Margaret gets married. 1 week later, same day of the week. And then on the 16th, a new piece of information that I didn't have before. There are fans out there and they put together some timelines. And I like to try to use those timelines to orient myself and to know what I need to go look for. And these are not always correct, but it does mean that the fan read this information somewhere. And most fans only have access to a certain number of books. So, or documentaries or whatever it is. But most of these guys who are doing the timelines, they would have gotten this information from books. And so I can usually track a lot of this down. But I've got some pieces that I haven't tracked down that I'm going to be layering in. So they're not verified at this point. We haven't seen anybody say these things. Nobody from the time period. And we haven't seen like an article from the time period lay it out. That's what I really like to look for. But usually a well-researched book means they found the information somewhere. And most of the fans are quoting these well-researched books. And this one says that on the 16th, that Elvis went to the Memphian Theater in Memphis to see the Peter Sellers movie, A Shot in the Dark. So I ran with that a little bit and went and looked, and A Shot in the Dark, that movie actually came out in 1964, so 3 years previously. It's hard to believe that there's a Peter Sellers movie out there that Elvis didn't see for 3 years. Elvis is also getting these movies from the local, it's a place that the theaters themselves rent movies from, and then he usually has them sent to the theater, or the theater is already showing this particular movie, and therefore he can watch it there. And when I say that he has the movie sent to the theater, okay, I know what everybody's thinking. It's like a video cassette. It's not a DVD. We all know that. It's not a thin, nice little CD-sized DVD. It's probably like a videotape or one of those even bigger old videotapes. But no, that's far too small. And then you're thinking, well, it's a reel of film. And when most of us think of a reel of film, we think of a 16 millimeter reel of film. Probably an 8 millimeter reel of film, really, but most of us probably are picturing a 16 millimeter reel of film, which comes in a circle about 2 or 3 sizes the times of your hand. It's It's not something that's small, but it's not so gigantic that you can't carry it around or stick it under your jacket or you know, it's smaller but much thicker than an LP. Bigger than a 45. But these reels are 75 millimeter reels, probably. Or at least these 35 millimeter reels. But in the 1960s, they would have been very large. And you had to have several of them to actually show an entire movie. So one movie takes up a significant amount of space, and it's very, very heavy. It's so heavy that the theaters have special equipment to move these reels of film around. And you got to use chains and stuff. So most of us think this is like a VCR, and Elvis calls and gets the movie and somebody runs it down. It's a process. So most likely, I don't think they had this particular movie available, or it wouldn't have been easy to get, and Elvis has already seen it. I think Elvis wants to see the newest Peter Sellers movie, which was released on April 28th in the United States. So it would have been 1 month before, but Elvis didn't stop filming Clam Bake until April 27th. And then he was pretty busy for the next few days because we could see that he got married on the 1st. So, and he's been busy ever since. I don't think he's had a chance to get to the theater because that's the only place you could have seen this new movie. Unless he got a special bootleg of it somehow, or Peter Sellers invited him over to his house to watch it or something. Otherwise, you got to see it in a theater. So I believe what's happened is Elvis went to see Casino Royale, which is a James Bond movie. And in the movie, multiple people play James Bond, including Peter Sellers. Hi, Luann. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate seeing you here. It's 3:12 p.m. here. Now, what we're going to do right now is we're going to head over to the drive-in movie theater. And we're going to see if we can't figure out what Elvis saw on May 16th, 1967. And Gunn says that Elvis liked Pink Panther, didn't he? Peter Sellers playing the Pink Panther. Yes, Elvis did like the Pink Panther, but he loved Peter Sellers. And so he would have watched anything with Peter Sellers. This was the newest movie. I don't think he's had a chance to see it yet. Let's take a look for ourselves. So I think that's the movie that Elvis went to see on the 16th. Casino Royale. And on the 18th, he bought a Harley Davidson golf cart, and we talked about that in a previous episode. And on the 24th, it was Priscilla's birthday. That was her 22nd birthday. And on May 29th, they threw that second wedding reception, the one that was in Memphis, and what had been the slot car room, and would later be turned into Elvis's trophy room. But they had the wedding reception in there, and yesterday we saw a champagne glass made from plastic, which was probably kind of a new thing back then. But it was a champagne glass made from plastic that Nancy Rooks had been able to save from this event. And Marion says that she would have loved to watch this movie with Elvis. I bet he wouldn't have stopped laughing. And that she would have laughed most of the time because Elvis's laugh was contagious. And Luann says that she doesn't know why she remembers the drive-ins from back then. were very popular back then. At least in America, they were super popular. And where I grew up, there was a drive-in, and in high school, I went to it quite a bit. And that was about 20 years later. Not quite 20 years, about 15 years after this. Well, no, I was in high school more than 20 years later after this. But that drive-in was there my entire life. I remember we went to it. And sometimes your whole family would go. And it was one of those drive-ins that had the playground equipment in front of the screen. And so before it was dark, you'd go up and you'd play on the playground. And then you'd all come back and get in the car. And you'd probably eat a picnic dinner that your mom had fixed. And we'd be very excited for the movie. And it was very hard to stay awake more than about 10 minutes. That's what I remember. Because once it was dark, you were out. And on the 31st of May, Elvis takes everyone bowling at the Whitehaven Plaza bowling party. Now, we haven't heard that. And I haven't seen it verified yet. But it certainly seems like something they might do. And I don't know how that worked. I've never really heard about Elvis going bowling. So I assume he had to rent the bowling alley after hours. I think there's a good story here I might be missing. So I'm on the lookout for this one about May 31st and the Whitehaven Plaza bowling party. Gunn says that in Sweden they did not have any drive-ins. And that makes a lot of sense to me, Gunn, because if I understand correctly, and my understanding could be way off, but I think your winter season lasts 4 to 6 months, where there's a lot of cold weather. And since you have to watch these in your car, people will only come if they don't have to run the heaters in their car. So that probably would really limit the amount of time. We can usually get about 6 to 7 months that they could run them in most places in the country. But mostly they're gone. Some have come back as kind of a retro thing, but for the most part, they're a thing of the past and they've disappeared. So let's take a look at the next piece that we've got. And these are pictures from Priscilla's birthday party. You can see that she is very surprised right here. She's very bashful. Elvis has got that hat that he likes to wear at this period on. Priscilla's wearing a lime green outfit, 2-piece. Elvis has got a white short sleeve shirt on. So somebody mentioned the other day that it was odd to see him in short sleeves. But here we see him again. And he's got the collar turned up. He's got a big smile on his face. He's obviously having fun, surprising Priscilla for her birthday. I'm not exactly sure where they're at. Is this the stairway in the back of Graceland? They've got to be in Memphis, right? So this has to be, and this is not anywhere on the Circle G Ranch. So I'm assuming this must be Graceland somewhere. And Gunn says that yes, their summer's only about 3 or 4 months. So they probably can't make a living off running a drive-in. And Luann says that her memories about drive-ins were that her mom and her stepdad would get a car and they went to the drive-ins. And that she does remember a great big outdoor screen theater. She'd have been about 7. It'd been about 1966. So right around this period. Who knows? You might have even seen that Sonny West movie that we looked at and you just don't remember. And Marion says that they had a few in Germany. You had a few. I did not know that. But Marion doesn't know if they still exist. I didn't know they ever had any in Germany. And I don't know if they ever had any in England. I kind of thought it was an American thing, but that's very interesting. And here we can see Priscilla cutting the cake. This is her birthday cake. She gets to serve it to everybody, I guess. There's somebody sitting in a chair, and you can see their face, but the picture is not very clear, and I don't recognize this person. It's not clear enough for me to recognize them, even if I did know who they were. Do any of you recognize who that is? Now, there's a couple of other people. One's wearing a blue shirt, it looks like. All we can see is their arm. Well, actually, there's another person wearing a blue shirt on the left side. All we can see is their hands and a little bit of their body. And there's another person wearing, it looks like a sweater, a festive sweater. And this is in May. So it seems odd they might be wearing a sweater. I can almost make out a cross hanging on a pendant around their neck. I have no idea who these people are because we can't see their faces. But you can see that cross hanging right above Elvis's head. Can you guys see that? That cross? And Luann says that in Australia, all the drive-ins are gone. And the only ones left are abandoned, and they have grass grown over them, and then it's sad, really. It is. I watched a special the other day on YouTube, like, a 15-minute video somebody put out, and they went to a drive-in here in America that somebody has bought. They put up a screen on both sides. They're showing 2 movies a night. And the people that come to the drive-in, most of them drive these antique cars that look like the cars from American Graffiti or Happy Days or just any show cars, really. And they come to this drive-in so they could sit in their antique cars and watch movies in the old way. Now, he's got new equipment, of course. And he takes the guy on a tour of the inside and how he actually shows the movies now. But it was really interesting because it had been a functioning drive-in theater back in the 60s and 70s. And he's just updated it. And he's successful with it because people want to have this retro experience. And so there are people that come in their regular cars. It's just amazing how many show cars show up. And we can see that in this picture, Priscilla's still cutting the cake, and Joe Esposito, he's ready to get a piece. He's not going to miss out on any of this cake. Looks like a chocolate cake with white frosting. And Elvis, you can see his hat much more clearly in this picture. And right behind Joe Esposito's elbow, that is Richard Davis, who is Elvis's valet and does stand-in work in the movies for the lighting and the blocking, stuff like that. And Marion says, wasn't this picture from Priscilla's birthday party that she remembers there were horses on the cake? This is that birthday party. Yes, Marion. I just mentioned it in the wrap-up or the review of May 1967. But it might be fun to spend a moment here at the birthday. You know, the woman behind Priscilla, I do not know who it is. But I'm going to just take a guess out of the blue because it's not Joni. It's not Joe's wife. I think that might be Marty Lacker's wife. I think she was living here at Graceland at the time. She was in the garage apartment. And we know that Marty's here because he's going to end up on the set of Speedway. So I think that might be her. I'm not positive. Do you know who it is? Let me know. And now we're at June 1967, but before we get there, Let's revisit that birthday party one more time. Here we can see Elvis bring Priscilla down the stairs. That must be the back stairs at Graceland. And she's very bashful and surprised. She got a lot of hair in this picture. Her hair is very tall. And this is, just like Marion said, you can see the cake with the horses on it. And now she's got some presents. She has a very big smile on her face. Obviously, Priscilla is very happy at this moment. She has some rather large rings on her fingers, too. I'm guessing one of these is her wedding ring, and this must be before it's been lost. But you see how you can see a ring on each ring finger that is very large? I haven't noticed Elvis's hand, but if anybody does, see if he's got his ring on. And now you can see Priscilla cutting this cake and people trying to get into it. Maybe we can figure out who some of these people are, too. There's Grandma. That was Dodger we just went past. I think Priscilla received a new set of luggage for her birthday. That's what that looks like. That was Jerry Schilling, I think. And the guy with the hat on, I think that was Alan Fortas. And there were that guy there with that hat. I think that's Alan Fortas. And Luann says she doesn't know why Elvis chose to wear hats. That to her, Elvis doesn't have the face for a hat. That is Alan, yes. And that's the end of this little clip. Thought you might enjoy getting a chance to be at the party. And now we can review June 1967. On the 5th. So Elvis is still on his honeymoon. And he's going back and forth between the Circle G and Graceland. And he's been doing this since May 5th, as we saw. Well, May 4th. He returned and spent the night at Graceland on May 4th. So it's been right at a month. And then on Monday, May 5th, fans see them at Circle G, Priscilla and Elvis riding horses, and later in the day, they ride golf carts. And then there's a note from one of the fans on the timelines that says that Elvis rented Memphis Fairground on May 5th from 12:30 a.m. to 3:30 a.m. Now, I'm assuming that means the night of May 5th, 12:30 a.m., which is really the morning of Tuesday the 6th. And so that on Tuesday, they're at the fairgrounds from 12:30 to 3:30 a.m. Now, I could have that backwards, and it could be that on May 5th, he was at the fairgrounds from 12:30 to 3:30. They went home and slept, came back. They're sighted in the afternoon at Circle G on the horses and golf carts. But I think because these people noted June 5th, that it's really Elvis gets up like later in the day and he stays up very late. And so this is really part of his June 5th day. But it's June 6th, 12:30 a.m. to 3:30 a.m. And Gunn says that she has heard that if Elvis didn't want to fix his hair, he just put a hat on. There's probably a lot of truth to that, too. He probably felt self-conscious about going out with messy hair. On the 7th, which would be the day after he goes to the Memphis Fairgrounds. There's a guitar-shaped flower arrangement that's sent to Anne Margaret for her opening night in Las Vegas. So it's not like he calls her or talks to her, and he probably did not even order the flowers. He told someone to order the flowers. But she receives them, along with his well wishes. And on the 8th is Nancy Sinatra's 27th birthday. So this is just before they're going to reunite to film Speedway. Priscilla's birthday was her 22nd birthday. So Nancy's 27, 5 years older than Priscilla. And Marion says that that's what she does when she's got a bad hair day. She just puts a hat on. And Luann says that she just puts a hat on too, that's smart. And on the 10th, on a Saturday, that's when they begin the bus road trip with Elvis driving to return to California to film Speedway. And we've talked about that trip. And on the 13th and the 14th, so this next week, the 10th, the 11th, the 12th, the 13th, the 14th, the 15th, the 16th, the 17th, that's all on the road. Now, Marty says it took longer than usual. But as we can see, couldn't have taken more than a week. They might have still been on the road on the 18th. I don't know what day they really pulled into California. But we believe that they spent 2 nights in Flagstaff, Arizona, which is, I think, where that Meteor Park is. I have not confirmed that yet, but I think that's the spot. And then on the 19th, that's the first day of pre-production for Speedway. So that's when Nancy and Elvis reunite. There's some wardrobe stuff that goes on. The fan has noted that there was a 10 a.m. music meeting and a 2 p.m. wardrobe fitting. And after that, Elvis presented Nancy with a car. And we've talked about that in a previous episode, that Elvis gifted Nancy with a car. And then he records the soundtrack on the 20th and the 21st. And that's when he meets the governor of New York, Nelson Rockefeller. It's also when Vernon, Dee, and the Stanley boys come to visit him at the recording studio. So when we looked at that yesterday, the information that I gathered at that point indicated it was on the 20th that he met Nelson Rockefeller. But he records an awful lot of songs on the 20th. And this fan's information indicates he met on the 21st. And that actually makes a lot more sense to me. Because the 21st, he would have had more time. And it seems more likely that he would have had Dee and Vernon come on the 21st. But it's one of these days. I can't tell you exactly which one, because there's information that says both. And then on June 26th, that's the first day of filming Speedway. So all the pre-production is done. They spent a week doing pre-production. Now they're going to spend a week actually, well, how many weeks they're going to spend filming, but this will be the first one. And then on the 28th, that's the 1-year anniversary of Uncle Tracy's passing away, who is Gladys's brother, Elvis's uncle. Now, Elvis had another uncle, his Uncle Pat, that passed away in January. And so I've just placed this here because we know that Elvis loved his family deeply, and he cared greatly for Uncle Tracy, not just in the sense that he had feelings for him, but he took care of Uncle Tracy. So there's a possibility that a year from the day that Uncle Tracy passed away, and he had spent the previous 10 days trying to recuperate from a heart attack he'd had. And I don't know about you, but when I get about a year away from something, a lot of times it'll come back up in my mind that maybe Elvis was thinking about that around this period, because he would have been right at 1 year from that event. And we saw that the death certificate had been filled in with the information that the data for the birth certificate or for the death certificate had been provided by Elvis Presley. So we know he was personally involved. So this didn't happen in 1967. It was in 1966. But we've reached that 1 year anniversary. And Marion says that Elvis recorded all of the songs for Speedway in just 5 days. No, he recorded them in 2 days. Almost all of them in 1 day, and he did a few more on the 21st. So he did them all in 2 days. Now, what did they do for the next 2 days? Because they would have worked maybe on Thursday and Friday? I don't know. He might have had them off or something, because they're not reporting for filming until the 26th. Probably had a couple of more wardrobe fittings, stuff like that. Might have done a little bit of rehearsal with somebody. They didn't tend to do a lot of rehearsal, but if Elvis wanted to rehearse, then I'm sure people would have wanted to do that with him. And they might have spent those days doing that. But at this moment, I don't have any information on what they actually did. And here we can see Elvis actually meeting New York State Governor Norman Rockefeller. And Marion says, wow, 2 days is amazing. Yeah, it did take him roughly 4 days to record the Clambake soundtrack, because we saw that he went to Nashville for 3 days, but he did not report for one of those days. And then he had to make up some recording when he got to California. But even then, if he had shown up on the day he decided not to go, he probably could have got it all done in 2. So I'm thinking that Clambake is an aberration and that he normally finishes in 2 to 3 days. But I don't know for sure. We'll have to look at some other movies. And in this picture, we can see that Elvis has his family with him. His father, Vernon, his stepbrothers, the Stanley boys, Rick, David, and Billy. You can see his stepmother, Dee Presley. And Norman Rockefeller is just tickled pink to be standing next to Nancy Sinatra, who does look very tall and beautiful. I didn't realize she was so tall, really. She looks to be at least as tall as both Vernon and Elvis, who are right at 6 feet tall. Now in July, on July 1st, that's when Elvis goes to visit Anne Margaret in Las Vegas. So the story that we heard yesterday, where they spent some time alone in Anne Margaret's, the private part of her dressing room. And Anne says that Elvis fell to his knees and professed his true feelings for her, which she had always known and she appreciated. She doesn't say if she reciprocated any statements. But that happened on July 1st, which was a Saturday. And on July 12th, so they're filming the movie from the 3rd through the 7th, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, Monday through Friday. And then they're filming again on the 10th, the 11th, the 12th, 13th, and 14th. But on the 12th Wednesday, right in the middle of that second week. So this is actually the 3rd week of filming. That's when Priscilla announces that she is pregnant. And Elvis announces it on the set. And he tells the reporters this is the greatest moment of his life. And then on the 16th, he visits Las Vegas again. This is another one of those pieces of information I don't have verified. I would like to know what he did in Las Vegas that weekend. There must be a story about it. Otherwise, no one would know that he was in Las Vegas. But I have not yet identified that story. And Luann says, are you sure, Hillbilly Cat? It could be that D being 5 foot to make them all look tall. Might have to Google to see who's the right height. Well, I know that Elvis is basically 6 feet tall. Some people will say he's 6'1". Others will go as far as to say 6'2". I think the Army records indicate closer to 6 foot. Some people will say 5'11". Now, he wore lifts in his shoes when they were in Hollywood. All the guys wore lifts. Elvis started wearing them. And he was like, look, guys, I can look taller here, and then I have more presence when I'm with all these other people. They all immediately got lifts in their shoes. So in Hollywood, they do tend to be a little taller than they are when they are in Memphis, because I don't think they wear the lifts in their shoes in Memphis. They tend to switch to other shoes. I can't prove that. I can prove that they wore the lifts in their shoes. Everyone knows that. That's all over all the books. But I can't prove that they didn't wear them as much in Memphis. I just get that feeling that it was more of a Hollywood thing, because you're on the set, you got a lot of stars around, you're trying to impress people. But he was right at 6 foot, he and Vernon. Now, on the 26th, we read a magazine article about the child Elvis Wants that was printed in Australia in the magazine Everybody's Magazine. And that's 2 weeks after Elvis has announced the pregnancy, but the article doesn't indicate that there's been any new interview with Elvis or anything. It's more like the pregnancy's been announced and this magazine is rushing to get an article out. And Alan Hunter tells us about past conversations that he had with Elvis. And Elvis tells us that if he has a boy, sure like him to play football. That's his dream, is he wants him to play football. And if he has a girl, he wants her to be pretty and to get a college education, because that's very important to him that his children have a college education. And that was printed or available, or maybe a better word is dated, because it probably came out a week before or so. Because it's a weekly magazine, I think, maybe a bi-weekly. But it had a date on there of the 26th, which means that not long after that, that's probably when the guy's going to pull it off the newsstand. And it won't be available anymore. And on the 28th, Elvis trades a Ranchero that he owns for a Cadillac. Now, this is one of the Rancheros that he bought on the Circle G. And here, at the end of July, when he's still in California, so I don't know. My belief is the Ranchero's still back in Memphis, and that the trade is taking place in Memphis with the Cadillac dealer. You might have to go back and look at that in more detail. So I don't think it's Elvis himself that traded this. I think it's possible that Vernon has done this. And I'm sure Elvis wants the Cadillac. I'm sure that this is part of a planned thing. You know, it's not like Vernon's just gone rogue and is selling off all of Elvis's rancheros. But I think it's also an indication that Elvis's interest in the ranch is beginning to fade. And it begins to fade with the signs that it's beginning to fade is that he begins to trade in or dispose of his Circle G paraphernalia, the items that he's bought for that particular dream. He's going to start dispersing them. And this is one of the first ones. And he trades this for a Cadillac. And Gunn says that in that picture there were two rich men, one born rich, the other born poor. That's right, Rockefeller, he was born very rich. And Elvis, he was born as opposite the rich of Rockefeller as anyone could be. And Gunn says that as they have centimeters and meters, that she doesn't know how tall Elvis was exactly. And I was thinking of that as I said that the international audience doesn't know 6 feet, but I don't know centimeters and meters. So we're stuck there until one of us can make it to Google and ask it to tell us how tall that really is. But it's, I think, a bit over 2 meters. I think a meter's a little less than 3 foot. And we can see Anne Margaret here from that meeting that he had on the 1st. That wasn't necessarily what she looked like, but in his eyes, I'm sure she looked something very, very close to this. And there's another picture of her from 1967. So this would have been very, very similar to what she looked like as Elvis knelt in front of her, according to Anne, and told her how he felt. And this is Bill Bixby, Elvis, and Nancy Sinatra. They're filming Speedway. And Nancy says, I feel kind of sorry for those who don't get Elvis. A little more open-minded study and they would discover a fabulous soul who contributed plenty to the history of American music. Nancy thought very highly of Elvis. And Bill Bixby says, everyone always used to kid Elvis and all of us in his group. But that group was very, very important to him. And Marion says that 6 feet tall is 1.83 meters according to Google. So there you go. I guess I was wrong. It's a little less than 2 meters. But Bill Bixby, what he noticed was that what was important to Elvis was the people around him. And Bill felt he was part of the group because he says everyone used to kid Elvis and all of us in his group. Bill has placed himself within Elvis's inner circle, within his group. Now, Bill doesn't know he's not in the inner circle. Bill truly believes that he's a very close friend of Elvis Presley at this point, because that's how Elvis makes you feel when you're around him. And Gunn says that Vernon seemed a bit taller than Elvis, but it can depend on the shoes they wear, of course. Yep. I think they were right at the same height. I'd be hard-pressed to say one was taller or shorter than the other. from the pictures that I've seen. Obviously, I never stood near either man. What I will say is that if you actually make it to Graceland, or you're able to be in front of one of his jumpsuits that's on a mannequin, so it appears to be filled out, that you will be surprised that it's not as large as you think it is. That in stature, he's actually slightly tinier than I am, I believe. Because I don't think, even at my slimmest, I could have ever fit into his jumpsuit. I mean, even when my stomach was completely flat, I don't think I could have. And I was at about 160 pounds or less. I don't think I could have gotten to his jumpsuit. It wouldn't have been quite long enough for my arms and legs. And I stand basically exactly 6 feet tall. But of course, everybody's got slightly different proportions. But that's what struck me. Now, I met William Shatner one time. And William Shatner's only like 5'9", or maybe 5'10". So he's 2 or 3 inches shorter, which again, I know you guys don't understand the inches, but he's about a half a head or more shorter than I am. And it's extremely surprising because of his presence is so much larger. And when you see him on the TV screens, they've done things with the angles and such that you don't notice that he is not a tall man. But Elvis truly was about 6 feet tall, which made him taller than most of the actors at the time. And I think you could even see here, he looks like he's significantly taller than Bill. And you could say, well, maybe the floor is not even or whatever, but we know that Nancy's a very tall girl. And it doesn't look like Bill's much taller than she is. So it really looks like Elvis is taller than both of them here. Now, Nancy was at the front of that other picture, so there is some 3-dimension things we got to think about too, but it is interesting to always think about their heights, right? And what was it really like to meet them? And would you have been looking up or looking down? And Gunn says that no one is 2 meters tall. Well, I think all the basketball players are over 2 meters. Yeah, like I'm thinking every professional basketball player is over 2 meters. But no one in that picture was over 2 meters. Absolutely, I would agree with that. And Marion says that there are a few, but it's not much fun because you have difficulties with beds and doors. Yes, you do. And Luann says that she's only 5'6", the same as Priscilla's height. And Priscilla was very short against Elvis. Yes, that is true. She was very petite. And that brings us to the end of this episode. But what we're going to have tomorrow is a bunch of very surprising items. You guys don't want to miss these. It's really about the Memphis Mafia and what happens towards the end of this movie that truly changes Elvis's life. And then I don't think anybody really, because I never realized that this all occurs. Not a lot of it occurs within a few months period, but a lot of it occurs here in August as this movie wraps up. And you guys are going to be surprised about what happens. So make sure that you're here tomorrow as we wrap up Speedway and we get ready to move on to Elvis's next adventure, which I don't think is going to be the Circle G. Doesn't look like he's going to have time to make it back. But until then, I'm going to leave you with a song. And this song will be Circle G Dreams. Because I'm sure Elvis still has a few, even though he's beginning to sell things off like the Ranchero. And until I see you guys all again, you all keep on taking care of business. And thank you so much for being here.
I drew a line in the dirt, said this land could be yours. 1 acre each, a house, a porch, a door. I saw the light in their eyes, like stars in the dust. But the paper stayed blank, and the dream gathered rust. I wasn't cash poor, I was rich in belief, trying to carve out a kingdom beneath the cotton clouds and the Mississippi sun. But every time I reached, the dream came undone. Don't you forget what I tried to make, a home for the hearts I refused to forsake. They called it a whim, they called it a waste, but I saw a commune, not just empty space. Don't you forget me when the fences arise, when the ranch house fades and the silence lies. I gave you the downbeat, I gave you the land, but the kingdom never built still lives in my hand. They said zoning laws, they said legal red tape, but I saw a chapel in every landscape, a replica of Graceland, a circle of trust. But the curl was bust, and the dream turned to dust. I signed the checks, I made the calls, watched the trailers roll in like press dogs. But Vernon's face, tight as a gate, held back the flood of what I tried to create. Don't you forget what I tried to give, a place where my people could finally live. They called it a farm, they called it a phase, but I saw a future in the ranch's haze. Don't you forget me when the lights go out, when the house plans fade and the voices doubt. I gave you the downbeat, I gave you the land, but the kingdom never built still lives in my hand. Still lives in my hand. Still lives in my hand.